Hello to all, this is part 2 in our study of the Passover. Messiah came in at the end of the 69 sevens of biblical 360-day years. Nisan 10, Palm Sunday, was precisely 173,880 days from the Edict of Artaxerxes in his 20th year. This authority to restore and build Jerusalem was issued to Nehemiah in the month of Nisan in 445 BC. This is recorded in Nehemiah chapter 2. At the very time Messiah entered Jerusalem, and during those 4 days before the feast, the Passover lambs were being brought up for inspection. They were to be found faultless and without mark or blemish. Messiah too was going up to be inspected, first by the religious powers, and then by the civil governmental powers, which at that time was Rome. They could find no fault with him. We must not forget that the cry, "Crucify him," did not come from Caiaphas, Herod, or from Pilate. It was the popularly acclaimed judgment of the people, a democratic gathering, if you will. This mob was of the same godless, anti-messianic, anti-Semitic, anti-throne of David, anti-Christ ilk of the people that burned the temple in 70 AD. Daniel labeled them the people of the prince who is to come, meaning the people of the coming Antichrist. Here we see the noble Roman general Titus valiantly trying to stop this unholy outrage. So the Passover 32 AD did not bring in the millennium of Messiah. The Holy Scriptures in Daniel 9:26-27 are abundantly clear. Messiah the prince was cut off. He was executed at the end of 69 sevens of years. So Palm Sunday fell short of the Jubilee year by 7 years. Messiah was the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. The blood of atonement was shed at the end of 7 plus 62 equals 69 weeks of years. This created a gap between the terminus of the 69 weeks and the future 70th week. The terminus of the 77s will bring an end to this present evil age. At that time, the trumpets of Jubilee will sound. Holy history will then come to its appointed climax with the second coming of Messiah. Next time Messiah comes, things will be different. He will appear as the Lion of the royal Jewish tribe of Judah. The wicked will be plucked up by the angels of wrath. Messiah will then deliver and gather his chosen, judge the nations, and establish the promised millennial kingdom. There were no trumpets of Jubilee blown at the first coming of Messiah. When he entered the holy city on Palm Sunday, there were some who rejoiced, but he was not welcomed in any significant corporate way by his covenant people. There was no finishing of the transgressions or putting an end to sin or establishment of everlasting righteousness, nor did we see Messiah bring in his glorious millennial kingdom. But his first coming was not without purpose. The bridegroom of Israel was coming to his own with an offering of betrothal, and there upon that humble donkey he was bringing with him the bridal price. It was a costly gift. He was offering his very life. 3 days later, the bridegroom sat down with just a select few of his covenant people. He presented his disciples with the cup of communion. This was an invitation to enter into a blood covenant relationship with him. He was offering them his eternal covenant. At the Last Supper, Messiah was courting his disciples in the manner of the Hebrew wedding engagement. He was offering them the cup of betrothal in the realms of agape, the love of God. It was back then and still remains today a proposal. And even as Jesus Yeshua entered into the covenant meal with his disciples, Satan had entered into a militant, sword-wielding, dominionist zealot. Judas would have none of this. At that moment he deserted and set about his task of betrayal. The bridal price was rejected by the earthly religious hierarchies, the earthly father of the bride. Instead they paid out 30 pieces of silver to a betrayer to have Israel's visiting bridegroom delivered over to the powers and put away. Judas later returned the blood money, throwing it back at them. And so on the 14th day of the Nisan moon, as the Passover lambs were being slaughtered, Israel's promised Passover lamb was also taken to the slaughter. He was cut off, executed, precisely as the prophet Daniel had been told. At the end of the 62 or 69 weeks, Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. The Passover and the year of the Passion passed by with tears, and there was no jubilee. Sadly, they laid him in the grave. The sun set on that awesome day, and another began. The 15th day of the Nisan moon began the feast of unleavened bread, and the sinless unleavened bread of heaven was in the grave, fulfilling the feast. And so ended the first 69 of the 70 weeks of Daniel. The awful events of 70 AD, 28 years later, did not wrap up the 70 weeks prophecy, as preterists claim. There were, and still remain, 7 years left to run before the trumpets of Jubilee are blown, and Messiah returns to this cosmos. There is a large gap between the end of the 69 weeks and the future 70th week of Daniel, the final 7 years of this age. We have good reason to believe that the final 7 years of this age will be initiated by the blowing of trumpets, or the Feast of Trumpets, at the fulfillment of Rosh Hashanah, and the final 7 years will be terminated by the fulfillment of Yom Kippur at the Day of Atonement, or Day of Reckoning, at the last day of this age. At the end of the 70th week of Daniel, Messiah will return to fulfill his royal office as King of Kings. The future 70th week is set aside by God for covenant dealings with all his covenant people. At that time he will heal the breach of Jeroboam to reconcile the divided kingdom and reunite both houses of Israel. He will find and regather all 12 tribes to restore the union and the beauty of Israel. In spite of what the preterists and partial preterists and historicists say, there has been no continuation beyond the 69 weeks into the 70th week at all. Nor will there be until the 7-year sovereignty sharing covenant of Daniel 9:27 is initiated and confirmed, involving the nation of Israel and the leading G7 nations of Western Christendom. But the terminus of the 10 Jubilee cycles at the end of the future 70th week of Daniel will surely come, and when it does unfold as it must, on the 10th day of some future Tishri moon on Yom Kippur, during the fall feasts of some future year, the trumpets of Jubilee will be blown. This will be the last day of this age. This awesome day of reckoning on the 10th day of Tishri will wrap up the year, the 7-year sabbatical cycle, the 49-year Jubilee, the 70 weeks of Daniel, and the entire evil age. This epic future Day of Atonement will be a Jubilee of biblical proportions. This final day of accounting will see this present evil age closed out. Thus the 6th of the 7 feasts of Israel, the Day of Atonement, will come into its ultimate new covenant fulfillment. The trumpets of Jubilee will announce the apocalypse or unveiling of Messiah and usher in his 1,000-year millennial kingdom. This wonderful example of apocalyptic art is by Jewish artist Yossi Rosenstein. It faithfully expresses many biblical elements of the last day of this age. It is entitled The Final Prayer, and it is available for purchase at the Israeli Posters Center. And here's the website. I hope you're finding the videos helpful. Others are available at the YouTube channel Gavin Finley. There are also many articles on related themes over at the website endtimepilgrim.org.